right, let's look in more detail at one of our top stories there. The UAE coming in the top 10 for FDI confidence in Carney's annual index. But what will a trade war mean for all of those rankings? We're very pleased to be joined by Eleanor Siegel. She's a partner at Carney Middle East and Africa. Thank you very much for joining us.
Wonderful to be here with you today, Brandy.
So tell me first off, what are we basing this on? What makes an investor confident in a country when it comes to where they put their money?
Well, at the end of the day, a lot of what it comes down to are the core fundamentals. You know, how easy is it to do business? How stable is the regulatory system? Are there areas that the country is prioritizing that are interesting for countries to also put their money in where they see real growth?
Right. So the UAE's come in ninth globally. That is actually one place lower than the year before. What has got us in the top 10, but what has nudged us down a notch?
Well, first, I think it's important to note it was a marginal shift in terms of the scoring. It was a very, very slight change in terms of how they are rated by investors across the world. Around the world, this index is essentially a snapshot in time. It was conducted in January, so just after the end of the super election cycle. And some of the factors that help the UAE stay in the top 10 and remain there, they've been there for a while now, is around, again, this idea of ease of doing business, stable regulatory system, investments in technology and innovation. These are areas where other countries, when they think about where to put their money, their capital, these are factors that make them confident that they can see the kinds of returns they want to see out of those investments.
And what's going to make us move higher up the ranks?
You know, I think, again, it's a dynamic environment today. The UAE is a point of stability in a very volatile global environment. And we are continuing to prioritize FDI, and you've seen this in the national strategy that was announced last year, the targets to grow and double FDI in the country by 2033. It's moving quickly. We have the commitments here to keep the regulatory environment evolving and good for businesses to put their money.
Have you seen, because Carney's been doing this for a couple of years, and the UAE's been on SEPA trail for a couple of years. I think the first one announced actually during Expo. Have you seen a difference in our investment flows since those comprehensive economic partnerships and where we've come in this index as a result since the SEPA started being signed?
Yeah, I think that the answer is absolutely yes. I mean, again, these types of commitments, these types of partnerships, the UAE, it actually buffers it from a lot of the headwinds of today's volatility. It's helping them to maintain those inflows. And we've seen growth in all of these key areas. So if you look at where investment has been going in the last year, 2 years, it's around all the priority areas. It's around technology. It's around cloud computing and AI. It's around logistics and tourism, which are key sectors for us. And also, you know, those first few, especially, are priority sectors globally. So we are a destination now as a result of some of these partnerships.
But as you say, this index is a snapshot in time. You guys did this in January.
Yeah.
Feels like 100 years ago now. How is a trade war likely to affect global FDI? We talk about what it means for goods moving around the place, but what does it mean for capital flows?
Well, I mean, of course, there's going to be an impact. And ultimately, you know, we already saw in January that there was some anticipation that there would be more volatility, there would be more challenges. There was expectation that the landscape was likely going to shift from a geopolitical standpoint, even when we did this in January. And so already some of this has been factored in by investors around the world. You know, so without a doubt, they will be more conservative in terms of how they think about deploying capital. However, I would come back to this point again, which is the UAE is seen as a destination, right? When we look, if you look in the details of our report, what you see is actually the UAE is second only to the US in terms of investor confidence and appetite, right? People are optimistic about the UAE today.
Let's look, though, at the US, which tops your confidence index. Will the tariff policy that we're seeing coming out of the Trump administration mean less investment into the US, or with the focus on nearshoring, build it here to make it American goods, et cetera, could it actually mean more?
I think it's very early to make a decision about that and draw a conclusion. I mean, you can see just in the last 36, 48 hours how rapidly the positions are shifting from a tariff standpoint. Every day, it's a new story that's coming out of the Trump administration right now. So it makes it a little bit more difficult to pinpoint exactly what the implication will be yet. I think your last interview made a good point that, you're already seeing some shifts in the types of goods that are being moved into the country. I think there may be chances that we will see greater investment because it will allow companies to onshore some of their activities within the country and benefit from that presence. For the UAE, what's interesting actually is if you look at things like our aluminum exports, which represent about 20% of our exports into the U.S. from the country, but only 14% of our exports on a basis of our industry. It's we are not necessarily in a position where we're going to make that kind of investment. We've made some commitments already, particularly around cloud infrastructure and data centers in the U.S. I don't see any of that shifting from a UAE perspective. And I think other countries may also follow suit to some extent.
What about China? The US heads your overall index, but China heads your emerging markets FDI confidence index. And even though we've seen a U-turn in many of the tariffs in the last couple of days, we haven't for China. In fact, we have seen them increase. China says it's not going to blink. What does it all mean for China's attractiveness to investors?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. Look, our index isn't able to respond to an immediate shift in the landscape like what we've had. As I said, it's a snapshot in time. China is a destination. It leads in the emerging markets. That fundamentally means that investors have confidence that they can put money and capital into China and see benefit from it. And so I don't see a tremendous shift in that. I think that will continue to build on that confidence that's already there.
What about volumes in general? We've been discussing this morning, and it's a cliche to say, markets don't like uncertainty. Yeah. What about investment? Does investment just pull back entirely? Could we just see less deployed with instability, with uncertainty?
Yeah, certainly historical trends would indicate that you'll see some pullback in investment. As companies, as countries look around the world, they are, I think everybody right now is anticipating whether or not there will be a broader global recession that's triggered through a trade war. This is everywhere in all the analysis that's being conducted today. I think the implication of that is that there will be some pullback into certain industries, without question, from an investment standpoint.
Okay, so where is the opportunity for us? Because if there is one thing that the UAE does well, and we've got less than a minute with you, it's not to waste a good global crisis.
Yeah, no, we're excellent at maximizing our value when we see uncertainty in the world. And actually, I think what's interesting is the UAE, as I said, it's quite well positioned to weather a lot of the headwinds. We are, well positioned. We are a stable economy. We have good growth projections. Even if we may have some indirect implications from the trade war, if exports get redirected from the U.S., will that hit our re-export industry? Probably. But having said that, it opens up other opportunities for us within regional trade, with trade to Europe. Those goods will go somewhere. We will have opportunities to maximize our position, our economy, and our investments in technology, in logistics, in transportation to benefit from this without a question.
Elena Siegel, partner at Carney Middle East and Africa. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Brandy.